You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
A few years back, I took a look at a bunch of different games you could mod to play in first-person mode. Because, as is probably no kind of secret to anyone, it's a camera perspective I'm particularly fond of. And seeing as the gaming industry seems to be more or less in self-destruct mode lately, looking backwards has been far more appealing than trying to look ahead. Which is why I thought I'd go back and take a look at a few more games that also received that same treatment. Games which most people probably already own and are more than familiar with, meaning that there's no reason that you can't do the same thing as well. And considering too that every single one of these mods is completely free and requires nothing more than just an internet connection, about all you stand to lose here is your time, which, as we all know, is completely worthless. Either way though, let's get into it. Dead Space is still without a doubt one of the best horror games ever made, combining elements from both the action and survival horror genre to make one truly terrifying and pulse-pounding experience. Playing as engineer Isaac Clarke, you're part of a group stranded on the USG Ishimura, a mining ship whose crew's been wiped out by an infectious alien organism, one that just reanimates corpses and turns them into incredibly pissed off creatures called necromorphs. Now if you're like me, you've probably played through that original game countless times, making the premise of playing through it again with an entirely new perspective pretty enticing. And it shouldn't come as any kind of real shock that a game that was already a pretty damn good shooter to begin with is even better when put into a first-person perspective.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
For starters, simply being able to explore the same environments but from Isaac's viewpoint just makes things way more immersive. But it also really helps to showcase the immense talent and detail that went into the overall presentation, from the lighting and shadows, the modelling and texture work, through to all the various atmospheric effects. You get moments now where you're playing and you turn a corner and a necromorph is literally right in your face. And it also makes some of those sequences where you're ambushed or have something pop out of the walls to come at you even more frightening. Losing situational awareness could be seen as a negative, but I think in this case it actually just heightens that horror atmosphere even more. And it takes what was already a pretty damn tense campaign and just dials it up a notch again. And I don't know, like maybe I'm starting to get older, it's just the inner little bitch in me starting to surface, but I had to stop playing every 15 or 20 minutes because I was getting that stressed out. When it comes to the shooting, the way the camera has been implemented makes it feel like you're playing a regular old first-person shooter. And aside from a few clipping issues here and there, it's pretty damn seamless stuff. The main issue you got here is that from that first-person view, you can't see your health points. Thankfully though, the mod has the option to zoom back out to a third-person perspective with the press of a button, so it's not too much of an issue. And also moving around in 0G can be a bit motion sickness inducing as well. Thankfully though, you don't have to do this all that much anyway.
Okay.
It's obviously not the ideal way to play the game if it's your first time either. But for a supplementary playthrough, I mean, this is some top-notch shit. And it really shows that Dead Space could have totally worked as a first-person shooter, had Visceral Games actually taken that route. Installing the mod for this one ain't too hard either, it's more or less just dropping a couple of files in your game folder and you're good to go. What is hard to get working is Dead Space itself. As most people know, this is a notoriously difficult port, with a whole laundry list of issues, and for some people it's going to be a whole lot more than just downloading it and pressing the play button. I mean, it's probably no secret that there's problems with things like the VSync, which kind of screws around with aiming acceleration and can be a real pain in the ass. But even more than that, just getting the game to run in the first place, with there being a whole bunch of possible speed bumps there too. And even then, you still need to use a cheat engine to activate the mod to begin with, something which my computer would incorrectly identify as a virus and always try to shut down. Still though, if you take the time to get all this stuff sorted out, you're definitely going to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And this is a very entertaining way to re-experience this old action horror classic. Heh, damn good stuff.
Damn good stuff, sir.
Now, Rockstar's take on the Max Payne franchise resulted in a gritty, crime and drug-soaked journey through the seedy underbelly of Brazil's criminal underworld, bringing back gaming's most popular, pill-poppin', reflex-gifted protagonist. And minor problems aside, I think we can all agree that it was a worthy successor to Remedy's first two entries.
You're goddamn right.
It's no secret either that first-person mode and bullet time go very well together. Which then makes it no kind of a shock that a first-person mode for Max Payne 3 is going to be insanely good as well. In fact too, the last time I did a video on FPS mods, I did actually cover something similar for Max Payne 1 and 2, both of which were also ridiculously awesome. And this mod for the third game more or less does the exact same thing with similar results, ending up feeling like you're playing a third-person shooter from a first-person perspective, which you are. You'll still need to utilize Max's moves quite a bit here too, especially the shoot dodge, which is more or less just giving you this unhindered window of time to dome every bad guy in the room. But aside from that, it still plays like a pretty smooth first-person shooter, turning on bullet time whenever the odds are stacked against you and wiping out a small group of bad guys in seconds. What's also kind of great about this mod is that it really lets you appreciate all the little physics and ballistic details that Rockstar managed to cram into this third entry. I mean, things like the way that bullets enter and exit someone's body when they're shot, and some of those really complex animations when enemies fall down or tumble over something. What I find really impressive too is just how detailed all of the weapon models are, which is quite a feat considering you were never really supposed to see them this close up, you know, insofar as the game was originally designed around that more zoomed out viewpoint. Oh yeah, and speaking of, whenever you take cover, the game snaps back out to a third-person perspective. So that much-needed visibility component to the combat hasn't been hindered either, which is a pretty smart decision.
That's a good idea.
Obviously though, it's not all perfect, and you'll still see the odd clipping issues here and there. Rolling and shoot dodging around, for instance, can show off some pretty weird glitches as well. I don't even know what's going on with Max's outfit here.
What have you been doing?
And during the Panama level, I had what could be best described as a level-ending bug. But it would only take a modicum more of effort here to make the whole thing feel absolutely first party. And I think if Rockstar ever went back and properly added this mode to the game, well then they'd basically just be able to lean back and print money while everyone went back and replayed through it again. Something which is entirely possible, man, given how first-person mode is a pretty massive feature in GTA 5 and Red Dead 2. The final icing on the cake is that this is yet again another easy-to-install mod, requiring little more than just dragging a few files into your installation folder and then you're good to go. Up next is the first-person mod for the recent Resident Evil 4 remake, something I've been honestly clamoring for pretty much since the day they announced they were working on the remake to begin with.
I am flattered, but I'm a one-lady type of guy.
Now there are actually already first-person mods for both RE2 and the RE3 remake, along with obviously Resident Evil 7 and 8 being in first-person mode as well. So it's hardly outside of the realm of possibility that someone was going to do the same with RE4. And as history has repeatedly shown to us, there's just something about the horror genre and that first-person perspective that meshes together so well.
Present for you.
And RE4's first-person mod is no exception to that rule. Now this is definitely another one of those instances too, where you get a kind of newfound appreciation for just how gorgeous this game actually looks.
No fucking way.
But also too how terrifying the Ganados are when seen up close. And there was more than a few times where I'd enter a room or turn a corner, forgetting an enemy was there and just be scared shitless. You know, as in shit would eject itself from my body. The moment-to-moment combat is also a lot more fun as well in first-person mode, and combined with all of Leon's new moves, like being able to parry attacks and projectiles, this is about as close to Resident Evil Eternal as we're ever going to get. And that raw power and feedback you get when hitting someone at point-blank range with a shotgun, it's just on another level.
Ouch town population, you bro!
The one issue that this viewpoint does have is that you do lose a lot of situational awareness, which, yeah, is the kind of thing that comes with the territory, but it does make it kind of hard to see incoming attacks from the side. And considering the combat system in RE4 relies so heavily on parrying to avoid damage, this means you end up taking a lot of needless hits because you literally couldn't see them coming. All that really proves, though, is that this isn't the kind of thing you want to be doing for a first-time playthrough. I guess the other main thing to consider is that this is very much a mod that is still in development and not even remotely close to being complete, which means you'll see more than your fair share of clipping and animation issues. It is also, too, one of these mods that does require a fair bit of buggering around to actually get working, so it's not an entirely stress-free process either. For starters, you'll obviously need the mod itself, but to even install the mod, you're going to need to download and install the right mod manager. And then after that, there's like a bunch of other mods you need to make it work properly. Most notably, the one that removes Leon's head, because the camera has just been placed in that position, and it seems the only way to get it working was to remove the guy's head entirely, which results in some pretty hilarious cinematics and cutscenes.
You could be kidding me.
Where you see the guy walking around looking like that headless zombie at a reanimator. Apart from that, you'll also need a mod that fixes up the crosshair alignment as a result of now aiming in first-person mode. And then on top of all of that stuff, you're probably going to want to install the RE framework, which lets you modify the FOV, considering otherwise the mod's FOV is super low, coming in at around like 60 or so. Really does kind of make you wonder though if Capcom would ever make an official first-person mode for this. I mean, they made a third-person mode for RE8, is it really that outlandish to hope that they'd make a first-person mode for this? It would at least maybe get a few more people interested in checking the whole thing out. All up, it's still a pretty awesome mod, but it is just one of the ones you're going to have to spend the most time messing around with.
Oh, shit.
But if you've played this remake to death like I have and are looking for any motivation to go back in and check it all out again, well, this is definitely more than enough of a reason. Saints Row the Third is one of those games that I just find myself going back to play through every year or so, purely just for shits and giggles. And as far as games go that let me drive around and shoot people with a shark gun, I've got to say it's absolutely unmatched. So I was pleasantly surprised to find out that this is a game that's had the first-person modding treatment, with this mod referred to as the first-person camera experiment. I will admit that I'm a bit late to the party with this one, with the mod originally having come out way back in 2012, but there's since been a few updates to it which have thankfully made it a bit more stable. Again, like the RE4 mod, what this is more or less just doing is completely removing the player's head.
What the hell?
And repositioning the camera to that position, which then more or less hopefully lines up with all the weapons, to then give the appearance of a first-person shooter. Now this works for most of the guns in the game, from the pistols, shotguns and rocket launchers, just with varying results.
Impressive!
And the reason I say that is because keeping the torso intact has created a few clipping and animation issues. Most notably when you aim straight down to the ground where you can outright see your player's headless body. But it does also add in that very important feature of being able to look down and see your torso when you're standing still, which, as I've always said when you're playing as a female character, is a crucial piece of immersion that more games need to have.
That's true.
Either way though, for most instances, you know, when you're just running around playing silly buggers, the mod works well enough. It's a bit of a shame there's no way to toggle it on and off though when you want to. And whenever you hop into a vehicle, it's kind of disturbing to see what looks like a decapitated torso driving around at all these high speeds. Oh yeah, and again too, like in RE4, in all of the cinematics, you'll notice that it looks like you've been given the Mary Antoinette treatment, which is again kind of jarring and a little bit immersion breaking to witness. Nothing else though, it is pretty damn funny.
Lot of pussy on that thing.
Will say I'm a bit bummed out though that there's no kind of first person mode when you hop into cars, at least by default, with it instantly zooming back out to third person. Now, the solution I found to this was to simply equip the fists or any weapon and just hold down the right mouse button, because when you do this, it changes that camera to the dashcam view. And while this obviously ain't the way it's meant to be done, and it does make driving kinda tricky, it is about the closest thing we're ever gonna get. Not to mention the closest I'll ever get to feeling like Ryan Gosling's character from Drive, you know, if he ever ended up in the Saints Row universe. The main benefit this mod has is that it is almost idiot-proof to install, and all you need to do is again simply download that mod and drag all the files into your installation folder. There's even a couple of optional files in there which you can tweak things a bit even more. So compared to RE4, far less stuffing around with different programs and cheat engines to get it working. Out of all of these mods though, it's definitely the least refined. But if nothing else, it just reminded me of how unhinged these Saints Row games used to be. You know, until millennials came in and did their best at running the series into the ground and absolutely fucking destroying it.
Read the world.
Smells like privilege in here.
Anyway, finally that brings me on to the last mod in the video, and that's the one for Weird West, a game that barely anyone seemed to play. Weird West is an isometric immersive sim created by the devs who originally worked on Dishonored and Prey, and it's a highly narrative driven but also gameplay rich experience that had you playing through the same story as 4 different characters, with a high emphasis on the player's actions affecting the greater outcome and numerous ways to approach almost every single obstacle. I've always thought that isometric viewpoint was kind of a bit odd given the premise, but you know what, it worked well enough. And it's one of those games that I was able to sink 30 hours into without even realizing how much time I'd played it. For some reason though, it didn't seem to really score all that well, and it came and went like a fart in a hurricane. So I can't help but wonder if it would have been better off had it originally used that first person perspective. Well, now we can all wonder no more, thanks to a mod made by one of the actual devs who worked on the game itself. And yet again, one that is absolutely piss easy to install. This removes that zoomed out isometric viewpoint and puts you right there into the character directly. And it's a camera shift that works really well, with barely any animation or clipping issues to even worry about. Now it just more or less controls exactly like a first-person shooter, moving around and aiming with the mouse and keyboard, and also making the combat a lot easier, as you're able to see enemies now from that more zoomed in perspective. And when using some of those combat abilities like the slow motion, it almost makes it feel like a bit of a poor man's bullet time shooter. I was also again really impressed with just how gorgeous the game still looks, especially when you're moving through some of those more populated settlements and can see NPCs walking around along with all of these various weather effects. I mean, changing that viewpoint up hasn't affected the world building or the atmosphere, and it's still a really captivating game world. The thing is though, while it might look like a first-person shooter, it really doesn't play like one at times, and rushing into combat is still going to get your ass handed to you really quickly. So overall, like, it still really emphasizes the use of stealth over all-out action. And I gotta say too, that I found the stealth a whole lot trickier in this first-person mode, simply because you don't get to see that icon of an enemy detecting you unless you're actually looking in their direction. Sneaking through these interior areas is also kinda tricky now as well, because you're not able to see ahead into nearby rooms, you know, as you could with that zoomed out viewpoint, which means you have to rely more on your radar and looking at the enemy's field of view cones. The other thing worth considering too is that this was never intended to be played in a first-person perspective, and that means you're going to frequently be able to see outside of the world itself, with the skybox, or the lack thereof, totally breaking immersion. I also found as well that the crosshair doesn't even line up when you're doing that slow motion leap, making that mechanic pretty much useless. Still though, it is kind of crazy how such a simple modification can so dynamically change the way the game feels and plays, and at times it really does feel like you're playing Dishonored in the Wild West. Is it likely to somehow make you fall in love with the game though? Well, probably not. But I mean, look man, if you were looking for any kind of reason to go back and replay through this thing, well, then here it is, bitch. That might not actually be the worst idea either, you know, given the recent closure of Arcane Austin. Yeah, can I get an F in the comments? Either way, in an age where we're rapidly becoming swamped with upcoming immersive sims, there's never a bad time to go back here and play through one of the absolute GOATs.
He ain't lying.
And that just about rounds out the end of the video. I'll put a download link to where you can grab all of these in the video description. And if there's any other mods you know about that I could look at in future videos, well, be sure to let me know below in the comments. Thanks for watching.